every programming and scripting environment, they let you set variables. Variables just hold data that you can use later in your script or your application. So we'll practice creating a few variables, show how to do it inside PowerShell. So I'm going to launch the ISE, search for ISE in the Start menu, and you should find the Windows PowerShell ISE. And I'm going to drag this over. I've got a file here, untitled.ps1, that's good. If you need to create a new script, that's fine. We only need one open. Just make sure that you've got a file up here that you can work with. Doesn't matter if it's untitled, we're just playing around right now. All right, I zoomed in with Control+ just to make it a little more readable in the screen. So let's write this code. I've got $name equals Alice. Now the PowerShell convention for creating variables, we have to put a $sign before the name of our variable. Then we have the equals, and then in quotes, I put Alice. So what this is going to do, it's going to take Alice, the value of Alice here on the right, and it's going to assign it to name. Now, if you haven't done any programming before, don't freak out about it. That's totally fine. This isn't like math where the two sides are equal. Instead, we're taking the stuff on the right, and that equal sign is essentially absorbing that value into the variable named name in this case. So key idea in PowerShell, we've got to put a $sign before our variable names. That convention is common in scripting. It's not so common in other programming languages like C# or Java or Python. But here, we got to do it. I'm going to put my cursor in this line 1. You can right click and say run selection. Again, you don't have to select all that text to run the selection. It'll run that whole line for you. The code runs. It says name equals Alice. We don't get any output because we didn't tell PowerShell to actually do anything with that value, and that's fine. It ran the code. And now we have a variable that we can access later. So on line 2, if I just put $name here, we get some IntelliSense. It knows that I've got a variable named name. So it's matching name. I got file name, application name, all that kind of stuff that PowerShell thinks I might be interested in. Well, the first one's what I want. I just want that name there. So if I right click on this and run selection on line 2, it'll print the value stored in that variable. So it doesn't print out, name, it prints out Alice. I can jump down here to the bottom, and if I type $name and just run that, it'll do the same thing. So essentially what PowerShell is doing, it's taking the code at the top and it's running it for me automatically down here in that second portion of the screen. So that's good. Let's change our program. Let's make a mad lib. So we're going to make a few variables here. We've got delete everything, start over from scratch. We've got noun. What do we want? We also want an adjective. We want a verb underscore ending in ing, and we've got an adverb. So if you've ever done Mad Libs like as a kid, that's basically what we're doing. So let's assign these some values. So noun, ball. Adjective, fun. Verb ending in ing, hopping. And an adverb, lazily. All right, we don't know what our sentence is going to look like yet. I'm gonna be lazy, copy and paste my code. So we're going to use a write host command, and that can take a string as an input. So I put in quotes while $adverb one day I caught my adjective, noun, verb ending in ing, bred 2 ducks at the park. Okay, so what happens when I run this program? I'll select all these lines, just holding down the shift key and selecting everything. So if I right click, I can run selection. The first couple of lines, the first 4 lines are going to set the values of those variables. And then I get my fun Mad Lib. While lazily walking one day, I caught my fun ball hopping bred 2 ducks at the park. All right. Notice here, I just had to put the name of the variable with that $sign, and PowerShell figured out that it needed to inject that value here. So very common technique for if you're writing a script to automate something, you might write host to give the status output like updated file 1 of 150, etc. Kind of giving yourself status outputs or summarizing information at the end. So if something didn't work right, just make sure that you've got quotation marks. Make sure you spelled your variable names the same inside the right host as you did when you set those variables. It's a pretty basic application here. There are other, like right now, these are just string variable types, but we can hold other types of data here. Like we could have a favorite number, whatever your favorite number is. You can files equals GCI. So if we run favorite number equals 7, that's just going to take the value 7 and assign it to that favorite number variable. If I create this files equals GCI, when PowerShell runs this, it's going to list the files and directories and store those files and directories in a variable called files. So it's going to store multiple values. So one command, you can take that output and store that output in a variable. We can use decimal numbers, pi equals 3.14, or we can say fruits equals et parentheses apple, comma, banana. This creates an array. An array just holds multiple values. So in this case, we've got 2 items in our array. So we have to use a special syntax. We use that @ symbol to tell PowerShell, yes, this is definitely going to be an array. So that's a little bit about PowerShell variables in a nutshell. Super useful when you start creating more complex scripts. A lot of people, when they first start out with PowerShell, they're just running commands from the command line, one after the other, and exploring their file system. But as these scripts get more complicated, we have to start to use variables to write more complex programs. We use those variables at multiple places, and they just help keep our programs organized. These concepts of creating and using variables in PowerShell and data types, these same concepts apply to many other scripting and programming languages.